Okay. Good evening, everyone. Here we are in August. I'm delighted to report that we had our second day of school at the middle school today. All is happening really fast, and it's been a good, strong few days of classes, which is terrific. Our high school welcomes kids back next week, so our team is preparing to welcome kids in fully next week, and it's a busy time, but an exciting time as we kick off the year. Um, for the mission moment tonight, I wanted to celebrate our incoming sixth grade class that began school on Monday. We had about 80 families and kids in session. Um, Recall, this is the first time that we're kicking school off a week uh, earlier or in late August. It's been great in terms of like thus far kids being there on time each and every day with their families. And we've got a few kids coming in next week when the DOE starts, which we expected. And so you've got some pictures here, a mom and her daughter. On the first day of school, we exchanged phones. I took some pictures with my phone. I had took some pictures of her and her daughter with her phones. So this is now memorialized for her. And you see in the background there the renovation at the school, where on the left you've got an elevator going in to the building. So a lot going on the school site, but same proud faces in the building and around the building. The middle photo is just our families, and these are families who are sending their kids off for the first day of sixth grade from elementary school to middle school, which is a huge jump. Um, this is our 11th sixth grade class, if you can believe that. And just being there over the past few days, I'm just in awe of these parents. They're excited for their kids. They want the best for their kids. They're all nervous as kids kick off the school day and school year in middle school. Lots of good questions. They're balancing lots of things, juggling all kinds of things, and just trying to sort of do their best. And so it's impressive, and I think we all work really hard and are overtasked, and I think that's true of our parents too. The last photograph on the right is Miss Gibson, our sixth grade math teacher and grade level lead, and she is now orchestrating a first day kind of circle with our kids. You see one child with a talking stick, which is a marker, and so he's got the mic and he's sharing. In this instance, um, the power of kind of like just having a circle and being able to sort of be honest and share your thoughts, and just a good first day activity in building connections across kids and allowing for kids to be heard and getting to know them a little bit and building trust. Some good things happening there in classes. A few highlights. We had a number of returning families in the mix, families going back to our first class. One note in particular, I saw a parent who I haven't seen since 2019. Her son was in our founding class and graduated in 2020, which, as you recall, was a remote graduation year. And I remember when her son was in the sixth grade, the mother gave birth to a second child, and that child is now in our sixth grade, 11 years later. So pretty remarkable and good to reconnect with that family. And I take pride in the fact that we've got so many returning families in the mix. Another highlight is we have three sets of twins in our sixth grade class. That's a first for us. So anyway, we're having fun, and it's been a very strong first few days of school in our middle school. So there's the highlight, and I hope you're proud. So moving on to our agenda for today, this looks a little different. We're going to spend a bulk of our time on two things. We're going to dig deeply into test results from the spring, both at the middle school and high school. We've got some good data to share. And so that'll be a bulk of the first half of the meeting. We're going to go into executive session before approvals tonight to discuss at the board level some committee considerations that have been discussed offline over the past month, and then also to look at some of the feedback or self assessment responses in June that the board took part in as a survey. And so if you recall, we didn't do that in July, so we'll do that tonight. And I think it's a nice time to do that in conjunction with the committee conversation. So that'll happen in executive session. We'll then pop back out and move into the approval items before public comment and thinking about our next meeting in September. So that's the run of show for tonight. let's get started. Make sense, Jim? Okay, so current headlines. I'm going to share out fewer headlines than I typically do and just prioritize some that I think are especially kind of important for tonight. Um, and so I'll start off academically with just a headline of the gains were strong at the middle school in math, science, and in ELA. We had mixed results at the high school with our Regents exams, and then some relatively strong results with AP exams. So we'll dig deeply into each of those baskets of exams tonight with Melissa leading the way. So that's sort of headline one as you kind of think about all the elements of school we're going to talk about tonight. In addition to exam results, another report out is like, look, we work with our kids for 7 years. They graduate and then we send them off to college, a good vast majority of them. So it's good to kind of think about this graduating class from June and where they are now. We had 90% of those students graduate in 4 years this past June. Of that cohort, 100% applied to college, 100% got into at least one college, 2 or 4 year. And as kids are now on campus or about to arrive on campus, based on our alumni success counselors' notes, 91% are expected to matriculate and be on campus in the fall. And that's a high percentage in comparison to where we've been historically, where it's typically somewhere between 75 to 80%. So, or 70 to 75%, I should say. So, pleased with these numbers, and I'll have a report out and an update next month. And if you've got questions or sort of things you want to add to the mix here, please just shout them out. Otherwise, I'll continue with the headlines. So let's talk a bit about enrollment and where things lie right now. And so the headline is just projected enrollment reflects strong middle school enrollment with some open seats at the high school. So right now we've got 86 kids as of last week on roster in the sixth grade. Our target is 95, so we do have open seats in the sixth grade right now and are actively recruiting students in this moment. I'll talk more about that in a moment. In the ninth grade, we've got 65 seats. Our target is 75. That may be a bit outdated too. We've probably enrolled a few more over the past few days. There has been action, but we've got some open seats in the sixth and ninth grade. Overall, 612, we have 530 as of last week in the mix. Our target is 550. Our budget is 545. So we're keeping a close eye on where things are now. I don't have data on where we were as of this time last year. I do have data on where we were as of July of last year. And if I compare this year July versus last year's July, we were slightly up over last year's July, and we had a healthy enrollment overall as of September. So we're looking to bridge this gap. The things we're doing include some pretty aggressive outreach to prospective families based on families that have shown interest in the past and checking back in to see if they're interested in joining our school now. And then we've got referral requests in the mix with our existing and former families. We do have a couple of people helping us out on the call front who are doing this part-time, and that's sort of a new layer for us is having one is a current family member at the school, and the other is someone who's done this work before with another school. So we've got some people who are actively making calls on the school's behalf to connect with prospective families. So that's happening now. We will continue to monitor this.
Can we compare first day of school to first day of school? Because presumably you
Yeah,
have that, right? So where were we last year, first day of school?
I don't have that data now, but we can get it. Yeah, and Chris, you may have that hand, and if you do, feel free to add it in the chat at some point at the front end of this meeting. I think right now, what's a little different from last year to this year is we haven't had the first day of school at the high school yet, and we started a week earlier at the middle school. And so, as I said, we'll have some additional kids very likely enrolling and arriving to school next Tuesday when the DOE starts school. So I expect for these numbers to uptick, and we're going to make every effort to make sure that happens. In terms of questions, I mean, I've given you a bit of what we're doing right now actively. Recruitment-wise, are there other actions that are worth considering at the school level?
I mean, I think contingencies if we're below budget, but Yeah, I think we can make that call a little later.
Yeah. Yep. Cool. So that's an update on enrollment. Let's move on to staffing. Something also that we're actively sort of like working at right now. And so we've got one, two, three, we've got six positions that we're hiring for across sites. Three at the middle school, three at the high school. We have two ELA positions that opened up fairly late in the game in August. And so that is hard to fill, hard to handle in a typical year. I think where we are this year is we've got some good staff who have who are completely ready and really talented with regard to stepping in and covering until we cover these two positions. And so in ELA at the middle school, which is a critical subject area, we've got our ELA chair who's teaching now fully in the seventh grade. And then we have a reading interventionist who was a former teacher of ELA at our school for a number of years, filling in the eighth grade. And so those two positions are filled by very qualified people, and we'll continue to fill those until we find talent and bring them on. We also have a humanities learning specialist position open at the middle school, and we're filling that with a history chair and an associate dean. So all positions at the middle school are being handled internally right now until we find people who we bring on. And at the high school right now, we've got learning specialist positions in three areas, history, STEM, and ELA, and we're covering those internally with staff too. And those are mainly teachers who are taking on an additional prep, an additional course. So that's where things stand now. We have had lots of activity with regard to applications and interviews. We hired someone on today, and I believe we have an interview happening at the middle school on Friday. And so the work is what we've done in the past, just keeping it really quick and solid and responsive. And so we've got coverage plans in place. We're advertising on all of the usual venues, Indeed, LinkedIn, ZipRecruiter, et cetera. We've got an internal referral bonus in the mix for staff who refer someone. And then I think for us, just sort of stepping back, we made some good moves this past spring in taking actions and creating policies that reduce late resignations, but we haven't eliminated that possibility, and we saw some of that here. So I think there's some more work that we can do there, and there are a few ideas now being discussed that we'll get into as we begin planning for the coming year this winter. So that's where things stand, staffing wise. Same question for the group. Are there actions here that you either stamp, underline, or maybe add to the mix? All right, I'll keep us moving with the last headline for this evening, which is just what we're focusing on right now. As I mentioned, we've had staff back at the middle school for 2 weeks, and now are engaging with kids, and like the work continues and just trying to get better each and every day, refine, tweak, make improvements, and so that's happening actively at the middle school and at the high school. We're still focusing on kind of adult only prep and welcoming in students next week, and so. The priorities of the school across sites are threefold this year. It's really about kind of really strong instruction, and that means sort of training up both our coaches who are training teachers as well as our teachers. We've got a new framework that we're using to guide kind of really sound practices in teaching, and so it's about aligning our practices to that framework. Second, just the implementation of our framework for a strong and positive school climate, doing that with fidelity. That's been something we've spent a lot of time at the middle school with over the past 2 weeks and is happening at the high school too. And so I'm impressed with the way in which we're practicing proactively with students the sorts of behaviors that are really conducive to strong learning. So that's been happening. And then kind of team cohesion, and a lot of that happening through a whole lot of positive reinforcement right now. When we see something's really good among a teammate or colleague, we're shouting it out and reinforcing it and being really precise about our feedback and praise. And so I'm seeing a lot of that happen at the middle school over the past 3 days, and at the high school as well. So those are the priorities that we're focusing more of our time on because they are priorities. In addition, as we prepare fully for September, we are making some upgrades to our data dashboards. So we have all the information we need in the fall to make timely decisions that are informed. Some of that relating to literacy, some of it relating to how we performance manage and making sure we're kind of hitting the high notes and the things that matter most in creating a really good space for learning. In addition to that, we are updating some of our practices with regard to how we conduct annual performance reviews and corrective action plans and performance improvement plans so that if and when they're needed, we do them well. Beyond that, we've got a rollout of the leader and manager trainings, which we haven't done explicitly in past years. I'm excited to kind of carry that out. And then we're making some updates to goals and targets due to the data that we now have that we'll be sharing out tonight. So those are some of the things that I just think make our organization or school sounder and more highly functioning and coherent. So that's where we are right now in our focus. I'd love to take any questions or insights here as you kind of see some of these things. And some of this is sort of big and headline in general. Would love to dig deeply in any specific questions you have about what we're focusing on now. All right, well, let's move forward and talk about we'll move into committee reports, Jim, if that makes sense. And I think with that, we're going to move right into student learning and talk about some of the data we have. Here's the agenda from last week's SLC meeting, and we're going to focus in on, again, state exam results at the middle school, Regents results at the high school, and AP exam results at the high school. And so with that, I'm going to hand things over to Melissa to talk us through and lead a discussion on all things results.
Great. I'm excited to kick off with our middle school results. We're going to start on a really high note. This is our second year of exam data that we're looking at together under the new standards for ELA and math. So we're looking at these next generation learning standards aligned exams here. So we are able to compare mostly to last year. We will see a couple of new data points. Our 8th grade science exam, it is a new aligned exam. And then remember that this is the first year that we're doing computer-based testing. Josh, you can go to the next screen. So all of our 8th grade exams, that science exam, as well as our 8th grade math and ELA exams, were on the computer for the first time. So we'll be able to see that impact as well. I'll say that in June, we shared out, or in the spring, we shared out some instructional forecasts based on how we thought we might do. Those were largely accurate. So when we tracked those smaller amounts of data, we said, is this going to be enough data to really tell us something about how we're going to do? And we saw that those were pretty on track there. And then predictions based on our January mock exams were less accurate. They strongly underpredicted how we would do. However, they did give us that pathway to plan in order to get these data points. So we're balancing the utility of having really good information to plan our strategies from versus really predictive information. But we'll take what we have here. So some of the headlines, strengths, we saw some significant yearly gains in ELA, math, and science. Yearly gains in ELA, math, and science as well for students with IEPs, and some of those were significant. Our proficiency rates largely increased by grade level. So we see that beautiful upward line reflecting gradual forward growth in 6 through 8. From an absolute proficiency standpoint, we significantly outperform districts of comparison and state averages in math for all students and for students with IEPs. We were on par or slightly above state averages in ELA, or like right in the zone. We outperformed district average for 16 in ELA, where most of our students, or not most of our students, but the largest feeder district for Unity is. And then we significantly outperform state average in science for all 8th grade students. I think, Josh, for the first time ever, or at least the first time in a long time. So we're excited about that fresh data. That's new for anybody who was around last Thursday or last Friday morning.
Mm.
And then we outperformed districts in ELA, math, and eighth grade science for students with IEPs. We still have some concerns. This is great news and the right direction, but there are some areas where we want to grow even more. We did not outperform our district of location in 13 for all students. We were behind by 1 point. So we would like to reverse that for next year. And then over a quarter of our students are far below proficiency and scored ones in ELA. That is not a surprise. Our data has told us that that is likely and that was consistent, but that is an area of growth for us and an area where we want to put our resources. Any questions before we get into the beautiful charts and graphs of it?
Yeah. Let's do it.
Let's look at these words in visual form. So here you're seeing ELA. This was the area we've been watching for a couple years and especially last year. Our 2024 target was 53. We did underperform what we'd hoped for with a 49%. You can see there that it is just a point behind CSD 13 and on par with the state, but exceeded 16, where many of our students come from. You can also see our historical data behind there. In 2023, we had a 41% overall proficiency rate, which means that we saw 8 percentage points growth this year. Our target was set on last year's districts of location score. So those 8% points over last year are great. And they served us in meeting the city, though we will try to exceed that 53% this year.
Melissa, may I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Do you have data on percentage participation? Like how many kids skip the tests altogether, both at Unity and
Across the
senior
state.
statewide? And how does that affect comparisons? Like, do we think it's kids who would overperform or would not, or how,
Yeah.
does that make a difference?
It is a
Awesome
really
question.
good question. And I don't have that yet. When the NICEAD data site has completely rolled over with this year's data, these are still the preliminary results. We will have that information. So I think that is something for us to compare soon when we have that official information. I
Okay.
suspect that our opt-out rate is fairly low. It's less, I think, than 10%, Josh.
Yeah, we're
Even
95% of our kids take these exams. It
Yeah.
might be maybe closer to 97, 98%.
Yeah, we we work for that too. There's some parents who are like, I don't think so, and we'll give them a call and say, your child should take this exam. They've been working really hard for this. There are very occasional instances where that happens. I think it is more regular across certain schools in the city and then across the state as a whole. So I think that we will have higher participation rates as well, and then higher participation likely than District 13. But I think let's jot that one down and return when that data is uploaded for all of us, and it'll be easy to see and available this year.
Thank you.
You're
Yeah.
welcome.
What I just named that's notable here is that you'll see that like the state dropped by a point, our district of location 13 dropped by 7 points, and we went up this past year by 8 points. So I think we're bucking the trend with regard to like progress and forward movement.
Yes. Thank you, Josh, for pointing that out. And I think we're going to see a little bit more of that soon on some other spots too, which we're excited about from our seat, though largely hope that we all move up next year. So here we have our achieved proficiency levels in ELA for by grade and overall, and you can see across years we have more students. The blue represents below, it represents ones. We have more students in our current 7th grade, last year's 6th grade, who are scoring in that below proficiency 1 bucket, and it goes down across years with our 7th graders being right now 8th graders being pretty fierce as well. We do want to see these proficient and exceeds numbers going up each year, and we are seeing that here as well. So not only when we look at our absolute pass rates, are we seeing the right trend, but we're seeing this across years, that students get stronger with us as well.
Other observations here that you think are worth pointing out, team? I think I just add here that these are the stories that we want to be telling, right? That we've got by grade level, more of our students demonstrating proficiency in their grade level as they progress at our school. While these aren't the same students by grade, it's a trend that we want to see both with proficiency and with those students who are far below proficiency and reducing that over time. So this is exactly what we want to be doing as a school.
Okay, let's look at another story we want to tell. Our target this year for students with IEPs was 34%. We have 31% of students with IEPs scoring proficient or higher. And when you compare this to our district of location 13, they have 26, and CSD 16 chases them with 23. We don't yet have that state number, Josh, so we'll have that soon.
Yeah.
But target is based on outperforming last year's again by 5 percentage points. 29% was how we performed last year. We were above city and state then. We had 5% growth this year. I'm sorry, we had 2% growth this year, still outperforming the city and or the districts of location and likely state as well.
So, Mario and Jim and Sal, you guys have been on the board for some time, so you've seen this data historically. And so this data is also very promising and demonstrates some growth on the school's part with regard to preparing students at each grade level to demonstrate proficiency. So this is also like the story we want to tell.
Yeah, my question is, and it's more of a question for the end, but can you, on the basis of this, or is it too early or what, identify of the changes you made, what worked, what didn't work, what you want to do more of, less of, and sort of how we do something differently next year if we want to continue the trend?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, awesome question. And we anticipate it. That's we should talk about that, both where there's strengths and where there's areas of a need for growth. So we'll get into that at the end of like the middle school analysis and do the same thing for Regents and for AP. Good question.
Here we have our the same data we saw before, where we're looking at across grade levels, our performance bands, and we see a greater number of students in that below bucket than we see with our sixth graders than we see with our eighth graders. We did have a few more percentage-wise of our eighth graders than our seventh graders last year, though our seventh grade was a very strong cohort of students writ large. And then we see that the number of students who are proficient expand each year.
So same general trend happening with our students who have IEPs, which is the story we want to tell. And as you know, in comparison to CSD 13, we serve significantly more students with IEPs. Let's move on to math, Melissa.
Yeah. And I will say, like, math is I wouldn't say surprising, but I'm so excited to see this. We had a really strong year in math last year, and then we had a curriculum change. So I was concerned. Usually when that happens, we see a dip. But here, we set a target of 57, which would have shown growth over our strong year last year. And we ended up with a 62% of students proficient in math across Unity. This is really exciting when we look at all of our measures of comparison. It is well above the 50% of the state that was proficient. Is well above the 39% for District 13 and the 43% of District 16. Everybody went up a little bit last year, or rather, our districts of location in comparison went up last year, but we went up just a bit more precipitously than them. And then and exceeding our target, which is really exciting. We saw 10 percentage points gains over the last year. This is, we know that some really smart planning went into this. Again, we did not quite see this coming in January when we were looking at our mock exams, but the smart planning that came from those, as well as our weekly data cycle, really told a better story.
Any questions or observations on this?
Just one, one question, and I know, I don't know that it really matters because we're comparing apples to apples here across CSD 13, 16, et cetera, but did the test change at all?
The test changed last year. So the only test that changed, and Josh, actually go to the next slide, is the format of the 8th grade exam, where you see we have 71% of students proficient. Two things that changed here, and they are more aptly than not, is that 8th grade exam was online, and we thought that that would be harmful to kids. But it wasn't. They ended up doing quite well. And then as our framework now allows us to include our Algebra 1 results as well, which also went up. With 100% of Unity students receiving Algebra 1 credit. So this is the same format of test, or the same standards of the test, though our 8th graders were online, which I would think would make it harder. But
did the test, forgot the online part, did the test get easier? I realize we're outperforming the peer group, which is great. Did the test get easier, or
no? I believe I don't think that the test looked any easier or different this year.
Okay.
Josh, we saw a slight go back to the state.
I think it's more about when, I think Jim's referring to, there was a change in standards 2 years ago. And so after that exam changed 2 years ago, to change in standards for both ELA and math, there was maybe a slight boost across the board, state level with us, et cetera. But I think as you've noted, Jim, we're seeing comparative results with our peers where we're outperforming them. And so while the standards changed 2 years ago, we are demonstrating strong gains with the standards that we're now teaching to.
No, I get it. Yep. Okay.
Let's move on to students with IEPs in math as well. And these results are also really impressive.
Yes. So 49% of Unity students with IEPs scored proficient or higher this on this exam, which is very exciting. And then I'm toggling back on my screen. Remember that the state overall average is 49% this year. So our students with disabilities equals the state overall average. Our target was 34%, which would have shown some really great growth for us from 2023, when 29% of our students compared to 20 and 18% received proficient scores. We saw a little uptick in our districts of comparison in 13 and 16, but ours is just a lot stronger as well.
So really proud of our team here overall, and then our math team in particular here. I mean, if you look at CSD 13's results this year, we doubled the proficiency rate in comparison, and that's not something we've done in the past. So these results are strong this year, and as strong as they've ever been. Questions here before we move on to talking a bit about science as well? I guess there's one more slide, which is similar, right, Melissa, in terms of the trend overall by grade.
Yeah, you'll see that this is quite similar. Our 7th and 8th graders performed similarly, but we overall had that lovely arc across, or rather line, across the years.
So we're on par with state, or may have just outperform state in ELA, significantly outperform state in math. Let's move on to science, which is here.
Yeah. So here are our science results. This one is an apples to oranges comparison. As far as comparing ourselves to ourselves year over year, they are a different set of standards that students were tested on and a different format of exam. Our target was 53%. This year we scored 51%. We did recently get our state information, however, and 34% of students across the state scored proficient on this exam. You can see that that is very inverse of how we performed last year, with 30% of our students being proficient on this exam compared to 61% of students in the state.
This data is remarkable to me with all that it's showing, right? So you see the state went from 61% last year to 34% this year, when there was a transfer or a change in the standards that were being assessed. On the other side of things, we went from 30, which was not a great year for us, to 53%. And the difference between the state average and our average proficiency rate in 8th grade is very significant. So for me, I look at this and it just demonstrates for me, I mean, we've done a good job of teaching to the standards that were assessed this past year, and maybe started too early with that. We started a few years ago. And once the exams transferred over those standards that we were teaching to, the results increased. On the other side of things, it seems as if the average school in the state maybe didn't teach those same standards in the same way, and that would explain the significant drop in proficiency among 8th graders across the state.
Yeah, science is really interesting here because there was a shift to this new set of standards, and just a very different sort of philosophy around how science is taught across the state. And the shift in standards happened quite a few years before the shift in the exam happened, for different reasons. So by the time that this exam arrived, our students were doing storyline based, problem based thinking, and it really paid off.
Other observations or things worth underlining or noting here among board members?
Yeah, I mean, putting the numbers aside, is that a better way to learn science, the new metric? How do you guys view that?
Good question.
Oh, yes, it's so much better. If you ever want to hang out and look at the two tests side by side, like I did before, I've been trying to get folks to talk to me about this. It's strikingly different how much more like how much more collegiate, how much more like actual scientific reasoning the newer assessment is than the old one, which I call a salad of science information, kind of mixed up and without really digging in. So I think it is a better exam. It's a better measure of whether kids can do scientific reasoning while reading and interpreting information.
Okay, thanks.
Here, because the standardized exam is given just in 5th and 8th grade, we can't see our students progress against time, but we can see that we have a very small number of students in that below proficiency bucket, which bodes well for some of the shifts we'll make this year at science in the high school as well. Hopefully that will serve them well. And then these are the rates for students with IEPs. This was our target. This is how students did last year. So while we don't yet have our districts of location and state numbers for students with IEPs, if it's a similar trend where overall across the state students dropped, but this is how students with disabilities did last year, even if they held, we would just be very far above. And then same, very few numbers, and not terribly different than our students' overall performance for students with IEPs, especially in that lowest bucket.
Yeah. So as we think about preparing kids for high school, I'm pleased. It's not perfect. There's still work to do that we're excited to do, but a vast majority of our kids are either proficient in science based on this exam, or partially proficient and close. And so that's why we do the work we do. So this feels good, and we're eager to continue to sort of see it through and improve upon it. So let's kind of wrap things up. I think some of this will go back to Marion's question earlier. So Melissa, I'll let you take this.
Yeah, definitely. So key drivers in gains. We made some big bets, and usually when you make these bets, we see things go differently directionally for a short amount of time. But we did some really smart thinking around curricula last year. So we had new curricula in all three of these subject areas. And I think like even the ones that were a little bit more challenging to implement still elevated the level of performance for students. We had stability among educators who had strong familiarity with the content in school, particularly in math and science. That isn't to say we did have a couple of vacancies in math and science, but the way that we flex that in was to put in our department chair, to put in some strong folks and do some smart things so that the backbone of that team was continuous year over year. Science as well, our chair is fierce. Our 8th grade team was returning and we were able to and they were very excited, both of those teams, about that curriculum they were implementing. So they really made it live. Actually, I heard from some of the reps at our partners that they had some of the strongest first-year implementation that they've seen. We had an effective use of formative assessment data to inform remediation. So while our IAs, which are given early, and our true mock exams were not predictive at the middle school, they ushered in a period of planning that was very, very standards aligned and based on specific kid needs. And we did regular weekly assessments and were able to see growth over time and to use that data to create really smart groupings. And then we had relatively strong management in support of classroom expectations at the school. Those who came to the middle school last year saw strong and focused classrooms where kids are working hard.
Mm-hmm. Marion, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, I think my question was maybe a little more granular, but I think that's what you're doing. You guys are looking at sort of, you know, what was the data that we thought was going to be predictive and ended up not being so, and all of that. So I'd be curious to know what else we find out, other than, you know, obviously when teachers are motivated and they like the material, they tend to do better, which is great that it actually happened. I don't think it's a surprise, but I think it's great that it actually happened.
Mm-hmm.
And when the material is like certainly worthy and it's been vetted for that, it helps. And when they know how they're doing and kids know how they're doing.
Yeah. And I think, you know, I'll underline what Melissa said, which is like the middle school team's done a really good job over the past 2 years of having and positioning some strong veteran content teachers in classes by grade level. So you've got a really strong veteran at 1 grade for math in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. We mentioned a veteran in science. And so, you know, retention of strong talent does matter. And that alongside some stronger aligned curriculum really makes a difference. And so we're seeing some of the fruits of those shifts, I think, here in this data this year. And it's significant, and in some places surprisingly so.
And when you say move to a similar ELA curriculum, is that like a big shift again, or what does that look like?
It is a big shift. It's a good shift. We involved there were a few criteria that led us to the curriculum we used last year. We let go of one of those criteria. Initially, we wanted something that was being widely used within our districts of proximity so that we could see best practices at other schools. We found actually indirectly through Juliana, another curriculum that had all of the good things we were looking for, but from an implementation and teacher buy-in perspective was even better. So it's still novel-based. Kids are still doing tons of writing, still has Socratic seminars, but the training and the usability of the curriculum is even better. Because we were already we involved the team a little bit more in saying, would you like to keep or shift? The team decided to shift. And because this ELA team is largely a new team this year, this fresh start and this level of training allows us to make sure that we are launching even more strongly this year. And so far, it feels really good.
And we think that's it once that's done, or are there any other places that we're looking at, or we think we should move to a different curriculum?
No, this is now our new curriculum fish tank is now 610. The next shift will be to roll it into 11 and 12 next year when we finalize creating that.
Thank you.
We've launched across both schools with training, etc., and folks are jazzed. They're excited.
So I think with regard to like next levels of analysis, we called this sort of the 1.0 analysis because there's some more fun data digging to do. And so some things we're thinking about is we haven't looked at trending toward proficiency or growth. We're seeing growth overall from one year to the next, but we'd like to look at that with individual students. And so that's something we'll be doing in the coming month. Looking at results by teacher is something else we'll do. I think a conversation that I'd love to get feedback on with the board here is, so I mentioned, and Melissa mentioned earlier, that our mock exams lacked predictability, but I think Melissa was always also smart to mention that when we talk about mock exams, they're exams that we're giving in January, which is relatively early. It's a few months before the actual exam. We haven't taught everything, but we're assessing kids on everything they might see. So we should expect there to be underperformance, and maybe we shouldn't expect it to be predictive. And so one of the thoughts here is that maybe we shouldn't call our January exams mock exams, but almost like preparation or information gathering exams that we then work from over the course of 2 or 3 months in closing out the curriculum for exams, and treat it that way and think about it that way.
Yeah. Or rather, like
there's something else we're using to kind of measure performance and predictability closer to the exam once more has been covered or taught by teachers.
These exams are true mocks. They are an old exam that kids take. They walk in feeling exactly like they might on test day. They walk into the same, ideally the same proctors. They walk into the same timing. They get the same snack in the morning that they might get on test day. All of that is the same, but they're not always interim assessments. They're not always saying, did I teach it? Did I get it? They're also saying, what is the roadmap between now and actual test day that we have to fill in if kids are going to do okay.
Any thoughts based on just that line of thinking? How we contemplate our January mock exams and what they should provide and what they might not?
And I will say the one benefit now that the test is stabilized for at least now, because they change with frequency, but for now, is that we can look at this January compared to last January. And those are going to be the things that are going to help us get to a little bit more predictiveness over time.
All right, so let's move into, so we've talked about middle school exams and we've done some celebratory work. One thing I will say is we've been doing a lot of that with our team to kind of honor the work that went into last year, as well as get hungry for this year and continue to sort of feel good about the work we're doing and the impact it's having on kids. So there has been a lot of deliberate celebration over the past 2 weeks in discussing and unveiling and recognizing these gains. As we move into high school, now we'll do some of the same thing. We're going to focus in on just some of the exams that perhaps are arguably most critical in thinking about graduation. And I think the headline, as you heard earlier, is like the results are in some cases concerning, in some cases okay to good. And so, Melissa, I'll leave it to you.
Yeah, so some context and reminders about what we were experiencing this year with our June Regents exams. We had a new exam in Algebra 1. This one aligned to the NGSS standards this year. This was also our last year offering living environments and earth science exams. We will transition next year to a biology exam, and students will take physics instead of earth and space science at the high school level. We don't have the same level of granular data cut up yet for district, city, and state. That will come as things are finalized. We'll see that in our NICEAD portal. And then this is our first large administration in our post-pandemic with no special appeals. So in the last couple of years, I've said, here's how we did. We are not excited about the results yet. But we do not see major dips in the forecast with graduatability because we are looking at a large number of kids in this bucket. That piece is gone now. We are just looking at pass rates. Some strengths. We saw yearly gains in ELA and in earth science. And then our concerns are low proficiency rate in living environment for the second year, a significant decrease in proficiency rates in algebra under this new exam, and then our proficiency rates in global history decreased by about 5 points.
And so we're going to provide kind of visuals and a deeper dive on 4 of the exams that we see as exams that kids need to pass and should pass on their way to graduation.
What's the proficiency in I think it was history? 5%. What's the end there? Is it 1, 2? How many people are we talking about?
We are talking about 3 to 4 children.
Okay, thanks.
So, and then 3 to 4 children, and though usually for every other exam we talk about, it's the easiest entry point to that credit. Global history is actually a little bit harder than US history, so students have another opportunity. So it is a little bit, I feel a little bit different than say Algebra 1 here, which is a very important exam. So our goal is 75. We set that goal using how we performed on this in the past pre-pandemic. That's how our goal is 70, sorry. 75 is how we performed pre-pandemic. We had 2 years with little to no data as students were, as no exam was offered, and then students were learning remotely and opted not to take the exam. In 2022, we had 40% of students proficient, small dip last year, 2023 with 38%. This year, a new exam rolled out as well as a new teaching team. We had a consistent Algebra 1 teacher for all of the Navy bars that you see, and we had a 22% pass rate this year. So that's a significant 26-point decrease and potentially concerning pending comparative results.
And so you look at the bars and it's just it's possible that the entire state and other schools saw a significant decrease too. And at the same time, 22% of students demonstrating proficiency in Algebra 1 is not a good thing. So we'll wait to see sort of what happens across the board and across the state, but we've got work to do, and we're eager to do that work in Algebra 1 this coming year, and for the students that didn't pass this exam that will need to. So there's some backtracking to do.
What we saw here is that our IA3s were largely predictive. Which is concerning because our mock exams at the middle school showed the number of students who needed to move, and then we moved them. We saw similar performance in our April mock exams at the high school to how we saw students at the end of the year. So thinking about how to strengthen that preparation process is very important. This course will begin the year on a corrective action plan where we're implementing steps to make sure we're seeing stronger results. Questions on Algebra 1?
I think in terms of time, Melissa, we'll take about 5 more minutes with Regents and then about 5 minutes with AP exams.
So I'll go through the next 3 and answer questions. If anybody has anything truly burning, jump in. If not, we'll look at the 3 sets of data and then I'll ask some questions. We saw similar performance in, is this next one actually?
ELA.
ELA. Nope, we didn't. This year we had 70, our target is 75 for this course. And we saw a pass rate of 58% of this course. However, this is coming off of the year where we had a 44% pass rate the prior year. We also saw this current cohort class of 2026 really struggle with their exams last year. So here we see 14 percentage points growth. So we're excited about that. Another thing to remember about ELA is that Unity gives ELA in the 10th grade year, where many schools give it in the 11th grade year. This opens up the door for students to take college level coursework, and it allows them to leave their, to not enter their senior year with a deficit in the most important exam that you have to pass the first time. But students who did not pass the first time will have this year as well to be in good standing.
Questions here about ELA?
We'll hold them.
Yeah.
I didn't hear any burning ones. Now we'll talk about living environment. We saw a 2% decrease this year, which was very disappointing after last year's low score of 25 percentage points, which is down precipitously from the year prior and our performance pre-pandemic. We fell severely short of goal and our historical performance. And we see that there were some things this year that were needed and did not come through. We need a consistent coaching and performance management in this course, and with sort of a shift in structure and leadership, it did not happen for science. IA3s did accurately predict this performance. But our week over week data monitoring suggested that students were growing who did not. This course will begin under a cap this year. And again, living environment will not be administered at Unity next year. We will move towards a biology exam that more closely mimics the tests that our 8th graders took in format and standards alignment for this year. We will also make some slight shifts in the curriculum this year, and those shifts will be in our other science courses as well, so that that department can do more strengthening in NGSS standards work. And then finally, we have our Global 2 results. We saw a 5% dip this year, returning us to our 2022 performance. And students slightly underperformed predictions here. And again, this course, we saw less consistent coaching in our prior school year than we had in our 2022-23 school year.
One question that members
why is that? Why is there less coaching?
It's contextual. In a couple of cases, we had a stretch and may have had a vacancy, and then that coach or instructor chair was teaching. In other cases, there was a lot of change last year with regard to the way in which things were staffed at the high school. And I think we in the end, in looking back, we did more change than perhaps what we could implement effectively. And so I think you saw that in some of these courses with regard to science in particular, and history with this dip. So I think
In
some
this
of the
case in particular, the primary role that the department chair was playing was in the classroom, and we're going to see her results in a little bit.
Mhm. One other note here is just we have defined targets for 2025, and so you see those with each of these four charts at the tail end in yellow. And I think what our principal at the high school is doing, which I think is quite smart, is she's looking at results in a very detailed way and seeing sort of which students this past year, given some of these results, particularly the poor ones, were close. And so, for example, if we jump back to Algebra 1, in looking at the actual performance of kids on that exam, and in looking at the number of students who were within 10 points of passing this exam, had they passed, we would have achieved a proficiency rate of above 70% on this exam. And so her approach this year in kind of getting the team bought in and fully confident with regard to results is to think about what is like within the realm of ambitious, but also reasonable. And so that's what you see here in how these targets for 2025 have been created.
How did the teachers going into this, how did they think they had performed over the year? And what was their reaction to a number like that? Were they surprised?
Some variation there, and I won't kind of get into like individual teachers that much, but I think in some cases there was surprise and disappointment. And I think that was particularly in cases where there was maybe a new exam with new standards. And then in other cases, disappointment. And I think there's some processing to do with regard to like what needs to happen and change in the coming years such that like they aren't experiencing this again and we aren't, our kids aren't. And so I think that goes back to some of the corrective action planning we're due to ensure that like there is continued kind of heavy oversight on progress over the course of the year from the first week of school on forward. And that thus allows for us to course correct in a more timely way than what was managed last year.
But did they think going into this testing process that things were fine, or like, is this a surprise to people, or how were they thinking about this?
Well, I think as Melissa mentioned earlier, our mock exams in the spring, which happened in April, May, were predictive of these results. And so I think
Yeah.
at that point in time, there was more effort put forward, additional effort put forward, given those results to correct. It was too late. It should have been happening all year.
Yeah. I think in some cases, for example, ELA, where there was a jump across time, they were probably somewhat pleased. The beginning of the year wasn't as strong. And then I think that there was probably some deep disappointment in Algebra 1. Folks felt like they were ready. And then as well in living environment, where I think that there is maybe just not the same level of data awareness happening as in some other courses until the end of the year when we intervened.
Melissa, does the overall picture make sense to you in terms of where you directed your efforts and where, the sort of earlier exams gave results, or is the predictability better in some places than others, or right? At this, are you seeing correlations to setting aside the wishful thinking, right?
Yeah.
Like, we would have hoped that things were whatever, but like, are you able to read what the drivers are, basically?
Yeah, yes, I'm able to read what the drivers are. I have some levels of disappointment about our end of the year strategies and our push from this altitude, where we put in the same structures that were successful at the middle school around regular data quizzes, around weekly data meetings with instructional leaders that just didn't pay off in the same way at the high school level. And I think it's sort of the like rubber meets the road, daily understanding of the content and supports that were needed at the high school level that we're trying to correct for this year. It was a hard shift from our kind of co-principal department chair structure that we maintained some of at the middle school last year. I think it was a lot of change too fast. So using the same tools at the middle school did not translate in the same way, but I was hopeful to see more gains. My bet was that students who were close would move over that hump, and that did not happen. And I'm a little confused by that.
So I think with regard to drivers of some of the gains here in ELA and then some of the drops in the other courses, I think we can kind of begin to draw pictures and be informed by what we've done either in the past that's been successful or at the middle school that's been successful. And so I think consistent kind of like monitoring and growth efforts with regard to practice and looking at data is obviously something that's paid off across the board when we've been successful. And so doing that with fidelity across the board 612 is something that we're eager and determined to do this coming year. I think from another standpoint, I think, look, we've got some work to do, I think, with regard to our framework and approach and consistency of behavioral expectations at the high school. And I think the full team there would sort of say we've got work to do. And I think there's been some good effort over the past 2 weeks and hitting the ground running there. But coming out of last year, the team would have said, yeah, that this was a challenge, and there's some improvements that we have to make around how we implement PBIS at our high school, and it's happening. So I'm eager and determined to sort of see that through, and I think that also then creates some sound settings and spaces where like learning is happening without any distraction. And so some of those things I think are what we're focused on in the coming year, and that goes back to the priorities I mentioned in the headlines: really strong teaching and coaching under the Danielson framework, strong implementation of how we create a really tremendous learning environment in all settings of our school, and then cohesion among team. So those things in place this year helps to improve some of these concerning areas that we're reporting out tonight.
Yeah. I would double click what Josh is saying around the systems work and the behavior expectations and realities in our high school. And some of those behaviors include things like attendance. So a major unknown each week, as we were seeing strengthening STEM's results on the weekly quiz level, there were still a number of students who weren't taking the quiz each week because they were not in class. So thinking about from a systems perspective, how we strengthen those pieces will create the environment that allows for the tools that work really well at the middle school to translate well to our high school.
So I think with that, we'll now transition to another set of exams also happening at the high school, where the results overall and arguably reveal perhaps the strongest year we've had performance-wise among our advanced placement exams. So Melissa, why don't we move into that?
Yeah. This is our 5th year in, no, this is our 6th year in offering AP courses, actually, because it was my 6th year last year. We offered one new course in 23-24, AP Pre-Calculus, which is an exciting course. It's not meant to be the advanced level of pre-calculus. It's meant to be for any student to get college level math at the high school level. So we were excited to bring that on the team. We did lose one exam in AP Seminar last year. Our teacher resigned later in the year, and that is one where you have to have someone certified in order to teach it in that specific AP content. 10 of our AP teachers were returning Unity teachers in some fashion. One was new to Unity. And this was our very last paper administration of AP exams. They moved to digital for 2025, at least at a 60% level next year. Some strengths. We are an open access AEP school and our participation is relatively high. I'm going to show you a number in a little bit that shows that it's much higher than across the country. About 35 students earned college credit by scoring a 3 or above. Only 18 did last year. About 87 students earned a score of 2 or higher. 2 is the number that the College Board says likely ready for college level coursework in this content area. Fewer
And
students
that compares to 66 last year, so big jump there as well.
Yeah. Fewer students scored a 1 on exams than prior years, from 65 down to 49% this year. And there's some notable performances. 55% of AP government students scored a 3 or above. 25% of AP Studio Art students this year scored a 3 or above. 23% of AP Biology students scored a 3 or above. That's a 6-year high for us. 20% of AP World students scored a 3 or above. That's up a great deal from the year before, and 18% of pre-calculus students scored a 3 or above. We did have some increases in the following courses: AP Computer Science, US History, and AP Language, so they're still lower than our goals. We do have some concerns. Proficiency levels decreased in the following courses: AP Literature, that was our star the year before. We saw that go down a little bit, though the enrollment was largely the same. And no students scored a 3 or above in AP Environmental Science or AP Calculus.
Are there any questions or wonderings as we begin to look at this data in comparison to the Regents data? All right, let's move into it.
Yeah. So this is a measure that comes from the College Board that I look at closely because it ties to the principles and design of our AP program. It is called the Equity and Excellence report that comes from the College Board. This is a measure that shows the proportion of Unity's entire senior class who scored a 3 or higher on any AP exam at any point in high school. This includes students, when we're looking at the percentage, who never took an AP exam. So if somehow you got through Unity without ever taking an AP exam, there's usually 3 or 4 of those students a year, but that's it, then you are counted in this number. This means that there's no way for us or any other school to inflate this number by choosing to enroll only students who have been classically high scorers. So it's really important to us. Last year, 26.4% of Unity students left with a 3 or higher upon graduating. That is up from 12.1% the year before. All of the other years have some sort of pandemic level data in them. I want to just, Josh, you asked about this. I found it and I added it.
Okay.
The most recent data we have about how this compares to everyone else everywhere is 2022. In 2022, 34.6% of US students took an AP before graduating. Unity's number is much higher than this one. And then 21.6% of US students scored a 3 or higher before graduating, which means that our students are more likely to leave high school with AP credit than your average student across the country.
I don't want to make a long comment, but my question on this, which we can discuss another day, is I think the downside of this metric is it assumes everybody's suited, everybody's time is well spent taking AP exams and AP classes, and that may not be the case, right? There may be people whose time is better spent like digging deeper in the grade level stuff. So I just wonder if we need not kind of focus our efforts on a more individualized basis.
Yes. And I think that's one of the reasons why we have a high number of AP courses for a school of our size, but we have a variety of AP courses. So you have like AP Art, even though we don't have a massive art program. We have AP Pre-Calc, which is meant to be a general program. We had AP Seminar and intend to have that again. So we have this variety, and we are a college prep school. So most of our students should be doing something that directionally brings them to college. That national number, sure, there are some students who aren't in college prep schools who might be served better, but at Unity, we do want students have this opportunity because this is part of the mission that we promised them. And we are excited that though this program is still fledgling, we are a little more than average in providing that reality for kids.
Got
And
it.
most kids are college bound nationally.
And to Marion's,
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, to Marion's point, one question that has come up at the SLC level that I think is worth keeping in mind, though, is quality over quantity. You know, there's some point where having so many courses can detract from the success of the school, I think. So there's sort of that overarching question to just keep in mind year over year of how many is starting to be just too many.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's about shifting some in and shifting some out, bringing in AP pre-calc, a smarter move. We saw more students get credit, even though it was the first year. It is maybe better suited to our students where we've had a very small number of students even eligible for algebra, and thinking about some of those other courses. And then like figuring out the sweet spot. Our ELAs have been trading off year over year. We've thought about history. We have 3 of those. It's kind of a lot, but we're going to see some pretty strong scores from that. So I'm not saying that these exact courses are the exact right courses at all points, but thinking about right sizing it makes sense. And we have one answer to that this year that I'll get to in a moment.
Is it so if you look at students who make, let's say they get a 2 in algebra, AP algebra, are they going to get a higher score on the Regents? Or because, I mean, is this like kind of a no-brainer where you just throw everybody APs, and if they don't get the 3, at least they got the 2, and that's still going to be better than taking the regular course? Or how do you think about that?
Yeah,
is it
already
not
graduating?
3 still better than not taking the AP?
If I'm a college and I have a kid who took AP pre-calc and I have a kid who took algebra 2 and everything else is the same, I'll take the kid who took the harder class.
Okay.
It's strength.
But will they have learned?
Point.
Yeah, but will that kid who took the AP class have actually learned more than the kid who took the kind of the lower level class that might have had more, a more relevant experience to where they are in life, right? You know what I mean?
You do. I think so, Jim, in thinking about the Regents results, which I appreciate you kind of doing, Algebra 1 and Living Environment are 9th grade exams mainly. And so those are exams that kids take early on. A lot of what we're looking at here with AP results are courses that kids are taking in 11th and 12th grade, maybe some 10th graders too, but it's much more of an upperclassman sort of suite of courses. So there's a little bit of a difference there. And so I had one other point, but I've forgotten it now. Melissa, what were you going to add or say?
I think it might have been very much traveling that same road. I think I was also going to say upper level Regents courses are also fairly rigorous. They just don't end in college level access. And I think when we look at our numbers of 2s, which is still college ready, we see that students do well or do show understanding in our courses here. These are students who opted to take the courses for sure. But the College Board provides a pretty good a roadmap to what college level coursework looks like. And I think that has strengthened our teachers' planning as well.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think Jim, the College Board is fairly generous with providing resources curriculumly that are aligned to the exams fairly well. So you can kind of take that and teach with it as opposed to creating. And so I think the curriculum that we have from College Board is of perhaps a higher quality than what we would create in-house if we didn't have that. And so that then, as we saw in the middle school exams, when you've got aligned curriculum, it can really mean great things with these end-line results. And so I think with some of the AP exams we have here, that coupled with, as Melissa said earlier, a vast majority of returners who are familiar with the course, have taught it before, looking to make improvements each year, translate into overall better results.
And again, the College Board would caution us not to get too over concerned with the threes that we forget about the twos. The twos tell us that kids are ready for that college level coursework after taking this course for a year. But it's okay if they take it in college and they got ready for it by taking college level coursework and an exam in high school. Last year we had ones that I agree with the SLC gives some pause, but we're improving here.
So just in terms of time, I think everyone on the board has access to this deck that was sent out yesterday, and so we've provided the summary numbers in the second slide of this part of the meeting today. And so as you look at each table for the 4 courses we're offering, and essentially what we did is we said, hey, what were the most highly performing AP exams we had this past year, and how did kids do on them? That's what's presented here. And the reason for that is we're really thinking about ways in which what we want is for kids to leave our school with AP credit, if possible. And so we're thinking about those exams where we tend to do the strongest, or our kids perform the strongest, and want to bring that to them so they're walking away with college credit, not paying for it, able to take perhaps more advanced courses once they get into college. So what you'll see here are the 4 exams that we were most successful in this past year, with that motivation in mind as we continue to build out this part of our school.
And then Josh, if you want to scroll to slide 45, there are some things we're doing next year. And the second bullet point talks to some of the concerns folks have. We have these large AP courses where kids don't do well. I'm thinking of AP Environmental Science. We had one stronger year, but largely students have not received strong scores in that course. There are a number of kids who deserve that opportunity, but running an entire course for that doesn't make sense. So we are, for a couple of courses, piloting this year, small online courses. This mimics what the city is doing, what much of the country is doing, honestly. So a smaller number of students will take those courses. They won't have perhaps as large an impact on our data there when we look at our overall data. But allow students opportunities without it being a drain on our programming. We are training actively those who are new to our team and taking courses. And then with these exams moving online, we have even more powerful data tools that come from the College Board. So we are leaning into those this year to do some more of the similar quiz work that we did with ELA, math, science, and Regents exams.
Do they do the stuff online while they're at the school, or do they have to do it on their own time at home?
While at the school, and one teacher will be in the room working with students. We've used this model in summer schools, and for students who have credit recovery, we're using a New York State and AP approved program provider that we've worked with before, but we can have kind of 2 small classes going on in one space while they're getting that AP level instruction.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. The City of New York is actually doing a program where there's times in the day where kids can opt into courses like this, but they did not make sense for our school.
Great. So we just did a good hour of kind of data analysis work. So I appreciate everyone's questions and ideas here. What we're going to do now is, I know I've got, I think, Marion for 15 more minutes. I propose that the board now go into executive session to think about the committee work that we'd be doing in the coming year, the composition of committees, as well as review some of that self-assessment response from the board in June. Discussion there, I think it'll lead into committee work, and then jump back into board approval items after that discussion. We do have quorum +1 tonight, so we could move into approvals at 7:45 and still be able to close out the meeting by 8 o'clock.